Hello, everybody. Good to be with you. My name is Jon Huckins. I'm the co-founding director of Global Immersion, a peacemaking training organization, and our work is to train people of faith to engage our divided, conflicted world in restorative ways. And thrilled to be on this and part of this summit, and to have a border summit in the midst of COVID-19, I think is incredibly critical, because these are realities and issues that can begin to take sidelines when our sightlines are only focused on the current moment, which is necessary in so many ways, but also it is necessary to stay engaged in the realities connected to the border and immigration and all the ways that impacts our communities and our neighborhoods. So thank you, Border Perspective, for putting this together. Thrilled to be in it with you. Glad you get to meet my colleague, Samuel Perez from Tijuana here as well, whether he's already spoken or coming up. I'm the co-founding director of Global Immersion, as I said. Co-founded it with my colleague Jer Swigert about 9 years ago. Live in San Diego, 13 miles from the border of San Diego, Tijuana, with my wife and 4 kiddos. And for us, we very much see this as a shared city. San Diego, Tijuana is one large binational metropolis, is one way we often talk about it. It's interdependent politically, socially, economically, relationally, spiritually. And our team, our Global Immersion team, is also binational. And so, I mean, even as I'm thinking about this moment, it was just over a month ago we were having our monthly team meeting in Tijuana, talking about where we were and where we were going. And now just over a month from that moment, we're talking about a present and a future that looks much different. And I think, if anything, the microcosm of our organizational life is somewhat a telling of the reality of what the border is experiencing in general here in San Diego, Tijuana, the complexities of this moment, the way it's shifted what was once normative just a month ago. And so a little bit more about Global Immersion and the ways that connects us to the border and what we would consider binational solidarity. As a peacemaking training organization, we found that there's no better way to train for the work of peace than to go to the center of global conflicts, to learn from the peacemakers embedded within them. There's something sacred about being displaced, especially as dominant culture, U.S. American-based Christians like myself, to be displaced from the context where I'm in control and be put in a context where I have to listen and to learn, and I have to confront my own brokenness and do some confessional work about ways that I have participated in empirical theology and nation state in ways that's impacted our neighbors in ways that are far beyond our understanding, and create space for us to renovate our theology and our practice to follow in the ways of Jesus, who brought about peace not with a sword but with a cross. And so for us as a peacemaking training organization, that looks both like a theological training and a practical training. And much of the journey has been for us over the last decade working with U.S.-based churches and Christian universities to help build that theology and that practice, and then to ask questions like, why haven't we inherited this theology? Why isn't it normative for us to think and understand that God's mission is to restore all that's broken, and that our invitation is to be people who participate in that? God's mission is restoration, and peacemaking is the vocation of God's people. Why hasn't that been a normative theology and practice for U.S. American Christians? And the answers are troubling, but they're also formational. It's a discipleship journey to say yes to this way of life. And it's a way of life that is going to come into conflict with a lot of the things that we've held with fists rather than opened our hands to release, whether it's power or politic or money or prestige. You know, as we zoom into the context of the borderlands, our Mexican neighbors would often say to us, you know, when the U.S. sneezes, Mexico gets the flu. And so if I'm living in the empire and 13 miles south of us are people that live in the shadow of the empire, what are the implications of that? Not only implications of that as a U.S. citizen, but implications of that as a follower of Jesus in the context of a borderlands where there's such a massive power disparity. So for us, this methodology of immersive learning has been central and to the formation of what we call everyday peacemakers. We define peace as a holistic repair of relationship, whether that's with my spouse or around my table or on my street and neighborhood, my church, or in systemic issues in our country or in our world. peace is a practiced way of life. It's not an esoteric idea. It's not just an international peace treaty. It's a practiced, subversive, costly way of life. And for us, playing that out in the context of the borderlands has been precarious and dynamic and enlivening. It's taught us that so much of the ways that we engage places like Tijuana, San Diego, a border context, is through the lens, specifically dominant culture, U.S. Christians, through the lens of charity, where we have something to give. We go build the house, we do the VBS, we show up when there's a crisis, rather than through the lens and paradigm of solidarity. This is so much of what you're going to hear from Samuel Perez, who's taught us that we don't need your charity, we need your solidarity. We don't need your one-off handouts. We need to be in relationship such that when a crisis like this, like COVID-19 happens, we are in relationship and we imagine, we build a response together binationally, where there's equity and mutuality and co-learning. And so for us organizationally, we try to model that on our team. We embed that in our teaching and our training, wherever you're coming from, whether you live in a borderland or you're in the Midwest or the Southeast or the Pacific Northwest, wherever you are, there are borders and boundaries that have been created, and you have an invitation to disrupt them, to dismantle them, so that we can be restored in relationship. That is our work, and we do it in other ways as well, not just immersive trips, but in webinars and coaching and training and speaking. So much of our training requires travel and gathering, so this is a moment where most of our stuff is becoming virtual in the near term and is forcing innovation and creativity in new ways, and we're grateful for that, and also really struggling through the implications of the opportunity of inviting people into the borderlands that we've had to necessarily cancel or postpone throughout much of the next foreseeable future. So here's a glimpse of what's going on the San Diego side and how it connects to Tijuana. Samuel will talk about Tijuana and our work through our initiative called Borderlands, that's walking with and supporting and networking shelters in Tijuana and migrants that are impacted. As I said, San Diego, Tijuana is an interdependent metropolis, but it's not equal. The infrastructure is not equal on either side. And that for us to presume that Tijuana has everything San Diego has and how to respond to this crisis is to miss the reality of the moment. As we're on the phone and Zoom calls with our colleagues in Tijuana, they're facing a reality that's much more precarious, and that their healthcare infrastructure is not like it is in San Diego. The shelters that are, don't allow for the privilege of social distancing. I have a privilege to physically distance in that I have a home to go to. And I can navigate this moment in a way that other people who don't have that privilege, we define privilege as the ability to walk away. Many people are working every single day just to put food on their plate. Many of my neighbors are undocumented, and their hours are getting cut, and they're doing anything to be out in the workforce because they're not getting access to the stimulus bill that just went through. And that's similar in Tijuana. You have shelters where you can't distance each other from people that are already vulnerable and without resource. So what are ways that in this moment we're trying to proactively stay connected to Tijuana, San Diego, while at the same time being wise about our movement and in contact with one another? It's reminding ourselves continuously about the necessity of relational connection. In a moment, many of us are feeling like, let's just isolate. No, right now more than ever, we need to be connected with our sisters and brothers on both sides of the border. So it looks like regular connection and storytelling. What are the resources out there that we need to know about? What are the stories out there we need to know about? How are we communicating mutually that we are in this for the long haul, in the context of our relationships of solidarity? This is one crisis. This is not the long-term future. And we will continue to be with one another well beyond this crisis. In San Diego right now, there are some imminent things that are happening. You may have heard Otay Mesa Detention Center has 19 cases right now of confirmed COVID among the detainees. Now, these are asylum seekers, vast majority. They're not criminals, and the way they're being treated right now is unbelievably horrendous. So what does that mean for us organizationally on a local level? We're part of the San Diego Immigrants' Rights Consortium, which is a network of a few dozen nonprofits that are working on behalf of the migrant community. And it's staying connected to the stories that are being told, amplifying those stories such that systems can change that impact people. It's also saying, what are the relational networks that we have here that can directly impact and get in the way of what's going on in this detention center, or our undocumented neighbors. So many of our friends in our neighborhood, most of my neighbors are Latino, and a high percentage of them are undocumented. And they're not getting access to the stimulus bills. So the conversations we're having there are much different. And the SDIRC, this network of nonprofits, built a relief fund that's only accessed by undocumented families who need support, who wouldn't get and didn't get the stimulus funding. So what are ways that you in your neighborhood, you don't have to be in a borderland, what are ways that you can mobilize those with financial resource to care for those that don't have access to what's just built into our infrastructure as U.S. citizens? Is it churches that rally together? Is it nonprofits that rally together? Is it a combination, cross-sector, that say these are essential, not only people doing essential work in our communities, they're essential human beings in our communities who we love and see our flourishing is connected, and we celebrate birthdays together. What's the invitation you have right now to leverage your privilege on behalf of those that are on the underside of this resourcing moment? A couple of things I'll say about how we're engaging binationally is, there's so much to do. My inbox and our collective inbox is filling with things to do, but we have to be wise about our mobility, about how we move. We have to be wise about our sustainability beyond this moment. So we're prioritizing our time and our energy to those within relational proximity to us, which in this context is pretty wide. But how is that focusing our energy rather than just being frenetic about saying yes to every single thing and then just being overwhelmed and paralyzed and sidelined? That's not helpful. What is helpful is a focused, sustained engagement with those that you have committed to for the long haul. And so for us, we're seeking to live that kind of relational commitment and that commitment to sustained relationships of solidarity beyond this conflict. Last thing I'll say, and I'll close up, is it's really critical, something that we've observed not only in this moment, but even in 2018 when the migrant caravan landed in Tijuana, that we have to have a collective vision that's far beyond any one crisis. That we have to have a vision for peace. We define peace as a holistic repair of relationship. We have a binational relationship that has deep roots and strength, and also areas that are very distant, that need healing, need repair. What does it look like to be connected in a way that isn't just a Band-Aid fix to this COVID-19 crisis? Resource. And that even perpetuates this kind of paternalistic approach where we're offering things down rather than relationships with. What are ways that we have a vision for peace of what things should look like in your neighborhood, in your city, and for us, binationally in San Diego, Tijuana, organizations that are rallying around a common vision for a restored reality? That has to lead our engagement, because if we're not in relationships that are connected to a bigger vision, we just, again, remain in Band-Aid mode and things disassemble after the crisis has faded. If there's anything we know about the work of peacemaking in the way of Jesus, it's a holistic repair for all the cosmos. And this isn't, again, a one-off. This is a way of life. And if that's the case, what is it going to look like for us to live lives that are not only sacrificial in their love, and but they're sustained in their relationships beyond borders and boundaries in light of a citizenship to a kingdom of God that transcends them all? So I just want to encourage you to think about what that looks like in your neighborhood. Maybe it's even in your home right now. You're feeling those conflicts arise. We often say that conflict isn't the problem. It's our tools. It's not having the tools to engage those conflicts well. So what are tools, practices that can resource you to move towards that conflict, whether it's in your house or on a border, that allow us to move through those conflicts and see healing and restoration? And for us, as a team, we want to commit to walk with you in any way we can. Our organization is committed to resourcing you for the work of peacemaking and the core practices, 4 practices that we coach and train into. Be in touch with us, ways that we can support, and we have a series of resources that are coming out even in this time to help you towards those ends. So thank you. Look forward to learning from the rest of you on this summit today, and blessings on the journey.